Why you explode over small things. The childhood wound no one talks about. There are moments when something tiny pushes you past your limits. A misplaced object, a slow reply, a harmless comment, and suddenly your whole body tightens as if you're under attack. You wonder why you're reacting so strongly, but the truth is, your reaction isn't to the moment, it's to your past. When you grew up in emotional unpredictability, your nervous system learned that safety could disappear instantly. So now any disruption feels like a threat. Your body reacts before your mind understands what's happening. This isn't overreacting, it's overprotecting. If you had to tiptoe around anger or silence as a child, you developed hypersensitivity to changes in tone, energy, or routine. Your brain still expects consequences for the smallest mistakes. So even gentle friction feels like danger. You're not dramatic, you're carrying unprocessed vigilance. In those early years, no one explained your emotions to you. No one said, "It's okay to feel this. I'm here." So now your emotions arrive like sudden storms, loud and overwhelming, with no internal parent to guide them. Your adult body holds a child's fear without a child's permission. You explode not because the moment is big, but because you've spent years swallowing everything else. Every unspoken need, every silenced feeling, every abandoned hurt. And eventually, the smallest spark finds a room filled with gas. You don't need shame, you need understanding. When you were young, you carried responsibilities meant for adults. You managed emotions, solved conflicts, soothed chaos that wasn't yours. You became the stabilizer, the peacekeeper, the quiet hero. And you learned early that your needs came last or not at all. This shaped how you respond to overwhelm today. Emotional parentification teaches you to ignore your own limits. You get used to pushing through exhaustion, fear, or confusion. So now, as an adult, you don't notice your stress rising until it boils over suddenly. Your body learned to endure until it snaps. Children who must be strong too soon don't learn how to regulate emotions. They learn how to suppress them. They don't learn how to ask for help. They learn to disappear. And those coping strategies follow you into adulthood, quietly shaping every reaction you have. When you explode today, it's not immaturity. It's the child inside you finally expressing what she couldn't safely express back then. All the swallowed anger, all the unmet needs, all the moments when you had to stay calm even when you were breaking, they come rushing out at once, desperate to be heard. You weren't meant to hold the world on your small shoulders. You weren't meant to mediate adult problems or smooth adult pain. So your anger today is not a flaw, it's a message. A reminder that you carried too much too early, and that you deserve to set those weights down now. You didn't choose to live in a body that stays on high alert. Your childhood trained your nervous system to never fully exhale. Silence meant danger. Footsteps meant guessing. Moods meant decoding. So now even tiny changes feel like emergencies. Your body reacts like it's protecting a child, because in a way, it is. Hypervigilance is a lonely inheritance. You notice everything. The sigh, the pause, the shift in tone. Your brain analyzes threats that aren't there, because it remembers when they were there. Your past taught you to survive, even when you wanted to rest. This constant scanning exhausts you. You're overwhelmed long before you realize it. Your window of tolerance gets narrower each year, because you never had a safe place to widen it. You were taught to endure, not to soothe. So when you finally explode, it's not sudden. It's the release of tension you've been holding for decades. Your body tries to protect you the only way it knows, through urgency, intensity, and alarm. It's not malfunctioning, it's repeating its training. Healing begins when you recognize this pattern with compassion. When you place a hand on your chest and whisper, "You're safe now." When you teach your body that rest is allowed, that slowness isn't a threat, and that you no longer have to monitor the world to survive. For many people, anger doesn't start loudly, it starts quietly. You shut down first. Your shoulders freeze, your breath gets shallow, your thoughts narrow into a tunnel, and suddenly you're no longer fully present. This freeze response comes from childhood moments when expressing anything fear, sadness, frustration was dangerous. So you learned to go still, to disappear emotionally, hoping it would keep you safe. Freezing was your small body's shield. But freeze doesn't make feelings go away. It traps them beneath the surface, where they build pressure slowly and invisibly. You don't notice how tense you are until a small trigger breaks the seal. The explosion that follows isn't about anger alone. It's about movement your body thawing all at once. Your emotions rush forward because they were stuck for so long. What looks like volatility is actually a release of feelings that had no safe place to go. To heal, you must learn the step before the snap. Noticing when your body begins to stiffen, when your breath shortens, when silence becomes a cage. This awareness becomes the doorway to self-kindness instead of crisis. As a child, you learned that your emotions were dangerous, not because they were wrong, but because the adults around you couldn't handle them. So you shrank yourself. You spoke softly, cried quietly, and held everything tightly inside. You taught your nervous system to restrict instead of express, and that restriction still lives in your body today. When you suppress your emotions long enough, they don't disappear. They pool like water behind a dam, quiet but powerful. Every disappointment, every small hurt, every unmet need stays stored. And then one day, a tiny trigger becomes the crack that releases everything. The flood feels sudden, but the build-up took years. Your anger isn't actually anger alone. It's sadness that was never comforted. It's fear that was never soothed. It's exhaustion that was never acknowledged. It's the voice of a child finally rising after a lifetime of silence. And yet, there's nothing wrong with you. Your reactions aren't failings. They are evidence of a heart that was never given space. A heart that learned to survive by staying small. A heart that deserves to expand now, gently and safely. Healing comes when you let that heart speak without shame. You explode over small things because your childhood made small impossible. Every feeling carries history. Every reaction carries memory. And your body is trying to finish a story it never got to complete. You're not broken, you're still unfolding. You learned early that if you could keep everyone else calm, maybe you'd be safe. Maybe the shouting would stop. Maybe the tension would ease. Maybe the people you loved would hurt less. So you became the emotional anchor of the house, even when you were just a child. Being the peacekeeper teaches you to read minds, predict moods, and prevent conflict. It turns you into a quiet strategist of emotional survival. But it also teaches you to ignore your own pain. Your needs were never part of the equation. Peace came at the cost of your own internal chaos. As an adult, you still carry this role like a reflex. You apologize for things that aren't your fault. You soften your tone even when you're hurt. You avoid confrontation, not because you're scared of anger, but because you were raised to manage everyone else's. And this self-erasure builds pressure inside you. Eventually, that pressure has nowhere to go. You explode not because you're unstable, but because you've spent years performing emotional labor in silence. No one ever taught you that you deserve peace too, that your inner world matters just as much as the one you tried to maintain. Healing begins when you stop negotiating your worth with harmony, when you let yourself feel your own anger without fearing the chaos it might cause, when you allow yourself to matter in the emotional landscape. You were the peacekeeper, but now it's time to keep peace for yourself. And that changes everything. Growing up, you learned that your emotions could overwhelm the people around you. Maybe they ignored you, mocked you, or got angry when you expressed anything real. So you internalized a quiet rule: don't be too much. And now, Every time you feel intensity rising, you panic, not because of the feeling itself, but because of what feeling once cost you. This fear makes you swallow your truth. You hide your frustration, minimize your hurt, silence your needs. But the body keeps score, and the inner child remembers. Every unspoken emotion sits inside you like a stone, and eventually the weight becomes unbearable. The explosion that follows is never truly about the moment. It's about years of trying to be the easy one, the strong one, the one who never caused trouble. It's the breaking of a mask that was too heavy to wear. But here's the part no one ever told you. Being too much was never the real problem. The real problem was being surrounded by people who couldn't hold space for a child with normal, human feelings. You were never too much, they were too little. Healing invites you to take up space again, to let your voice tremble, to cry loudly if you need to let your emotions fill the room instead of your chest. You deserve relationships where your fullness is welcomed, not feared. Some people grew up with explosive households. Others grew up with quiet ones where emotions were simply forbidden. Either way, anger was not allowed. So you learned to tuck it away like something shameful. You pretended you weren't hurt, even when you were. Anger is a protective instinct. It tells you when a boundary has been crossed. But if you learned that anger leads to punishment, rejection, or abandonment, you bury it deep. You replace it with compliance, perfection, or silence. Your body absorbs what your voice was never allowed to say. As an adult, this buried anger shows up sideways. You snap at small things. You withdraw suddenly. You feel irritated without knowing why. Your reactions confuse even you, because the anger is never about the present. It's about the past. This doesn't make you dangerous. It makes you wounded. Anger isn't the enemy unsafe childhoods are. Your anger is trying to protect you, to speak for you, to finally name all the moments when you deserve more, when no one defended you. Healing begins when you let anger exist without shame. When you place a gentle hand over your heart and say, "It's okay to feel this." When you give your inner child permission to have boundaries, to say no, to be disappointed. Anger becomes less explosive when it's finally allowed to breathe. After the outburst comes the silence. A heaviness settles in your chest, and shame wraps around you like a cold blanket. You replay every word, every tone, every expression. You convince yourself you're the problem. This shame is old. It didn't start today. It began in childhood when you were scolded for reacting, blamed for feeling, punished for needing. You learned that emotions make you bad, so now any intensity feels like failure. But shame blinds you to context. It forgets the years you spent holding everything in. It forgets the tension, the hypervigilance, the emotional labor. It forgets that your explosion was the result of chronic self-abandonment, not moral weakness. The truth is, you're not a monster, you're overwhelmed. You're a person carrying emotional debts from decades ago. You're someone who never received comfort after breaking, so now you punish yourself instead. Shame becomes a cycle that keeps you small. Healing comes when you interrupt that cycle with compassion. When you choose to soothe instead of scold yourself. When you whisper, "Of course you snapped. You're tired. You're hurting." Self-compassion isn't self-indulgence. It's repair. It's how the cycle finally ends. When you grew up in a home where harmony depended on you, you learned to disappear. Your needs became secondary, your boundaries became blurry, and your sense of self became negotiable. You became skilled at managing other people's emotions, anticipating reactions, softening your voice, becoming agreeable, even when you were hurting. This self-erasure becomes automatic, a survival strategy you never got to outgrow. But losing yourself has consequences. You silence small frustrations until they accumulate. You let people cross lines just to avoid conflict. You sacrifice authenticity for peace. And eventually, the pressure erupts. Your explosions are not contradictions, they're consequences. They happen because you've ignored your own emotional signals for too long. Your inner child screams only when whispering stops working. The outburst isn't the problem. The years of self-abandonment before it are. Healing means learning to disappoint people gently. To say, "I can't right now," without apologizing for existing. To honor the small discomforts before they turn into storms. To reclaim the space you gave away. Peace becomes real when you no longer have to disappear to keep it. Your mind tries to be rational. It tells you, it's not a big deal. It's just a small inconvenience. It shouldn't bother you this much. But your body remembers a different story. Your shoulders tense the way they did before arguments. Your stomach drops the way it did before punishment. Your heartbeat quickens the way it did before emotional storms. Your adult self tries to stay calm, but your younger self still believes danger is coming. The body keeps memories that the mind cannot narrate. Every flinch, every freeze, every outburst is a physical echo of old fear. The trigger isn't the present moment, it's the past resurfacing through sensation. This is why you explode before you understand why. Your body reacts first, trying to protect the child who still lives inside you. It's not irrational. It's protective instinct conditioned by trauma. Your reactions are survival, not failure. Healing begins with reconnecting gently with your body. Not forcing it, not shaming it, but breathing with it, grounding it, reassuring it. When you teach your body safety, your reactions begin to soften on their own. You're tired in a way sleep can't fix. It's the exhaustion of years spent managing emotions yours and everyone else's. The exhaustion of pretending you're fine, of being the strong one, of suppressing storms for the sake of peace. This kind of exhaustion builds silently. You go through life functioning, smiling when needed, delivering, showing up, performing strength. But inside, you're fraying at the edges. When you explode, it's often because you're depleted. Your emotional tank has been empty for weeks, maybe months, sometimes years. You haven't had the space to rest, to collapse, to be held, to be cared for. You were trained to push through, to survive rather than to feel, to endure instead of receive support. So your body rebels in the only way it knows, by releasing everything at once. Healing requires rest deeper than sleep. Rest that includes emotional permission. Permission to slow down, to say no, to not carry everything. Permission to be cared for, even if no one taught you how. So often, what looks like anger is really pain in disguise. Pain from being dismissed, ignored, or misunderstood. Pain from giving and giving with nothing in return. Pain from being the responsible one, the strong one, the overlooked one. Your explosion is the surface expression of a wound much deeper. When you grew up without emotional attunement, your brain learned that hurt is unsafe to express. So it transforms into anger because anger feels more powerful than vulnerability. It protects the softest parts of you. In adulthood, this conversion still happens automatically. A small comment hits an old bruise. A minor inconvenience mirrors a childhood disappointment. A delayed reply echoes a familiar abandonment, and suddenly the hurt becomes fire. But beneath every flame, there is a story. A story of a child who needed comfort and never got it. A story of feelings that were too big for the room. A story of longing hidden beneath intensity. Your anger has always been your heart asking to be seen. Healing means learning to pause after the outburst and ask yourself the real question. What part of me is hurting right now? Every time you find the answer, your anger softens, because the wound finally gets acknowledged. When your childhood lacked safety or predictability, your system learned that even small disruptions had big consequences. Plans changing, voices rising, doors closing. All of it could mean danger. Your brain wired itself to treat minor uncertainty as a threat. This wiring doesn't disappear just because you grow up. As an adult, when something small goes wrong, your body reacts with the same alarm it once needed to survive. Fear that you'll be left alone to handle everything. Healing comes when you teach your body a new reality. When you create routines that feel safe, boundaries that protect your energy, relationships grounded in consistency instead of volatility. Little by little, the little things become little again. Healing doesn't mean you'll never feel overwhelmed again. It means you'll notice the signals earlier, the tightening jaw, the shallow breath, the rising heat in your chest, the child inside you whispering, "Something feels familiar." Relearning your emotional landscape is an act of reparenting. You pause not to suppress, but to listen. You place a hand on your heart as if comforting someone small. You breathe slowly to tell your body it's not in danger anymore. You become the safety you never had. With time, your reactions soften. Triggers lose their urgency. Small things stop feeling like life or death moments. You learn to respond with clarity instead of inherited fear. You grow into someone who feels rather than explodes. This is not weakness. It's mastery. It's reclaiming the emotional freedom childhood denied you. It's allowing yourself to be human without fear of punishment. It's choosing presence over survival mode. It's becoming the adult your younger self needed so desperately. And you don't walk this journey alone. There's a whole community of people healing the exact same wound. The wound of being raised too soon, of carrying too much, of finally putting the weight down. If this resonated with you, tell me in the comments. What small trigger actually carries a big story for you? And if you're healing childhood trauma, emotional neglect, or hyper-independence, subscribe to the channel. You deserve a place where your inner child is finally understood.